Hello, my name is Suzanne Ketchke. I'm one of the pastors here at Crosswinds Church, and I welcome you to this LeaderLink e-training. Our LeaderLink e-trainings are designed to help equip people as they serve in their ministry areas. Our LeaderLink e-trainings are designed to help you lead and lead well. Leadership development is a core value of Crosswinds Church, and we want to help equip you into being everything God designed you to be. Today's training is going to be on our child abuse prevention policy. At Crosswinds, you'll often hear us refer to that as our CAP training. At Crosswinds Church, we want to remind you that we put a special emphasis on get real. We believe in being who God created us to do, and we believe that one of the ways we get real and learn to be a follower of Jesus Christ is we believe that we live it out. We believe in real life. We believe that is found in living a life of worship here in the walls of our church and outside everywhere we go. We believe it's found with real people connecting to one another at Crosswinds, but also remembering to connect to those outside the walls of our church, and real faith. We believe that real faith is lived when we learn to serve each other, but most of all, when we learn to serve the world and we go out into our community. Our CAP training is very important to us because at Crosswinds, as a United Methodist Church, we agree to follow what is called the Safe Sanctuary Policy. The Safe Sanctuary Policy is in place to try our best to ensure that all children are cared for and are safe and are cared for well and are safe in the walls of our church. Jesus said in the book of Matthew 18:5 that whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. See, when we welcome children and youth into our church, we are welcoming them in the name of Christ. And so why would we have a child abuse prevention policy? Well, it's an important thing. When people come in, one of their primary concerns are their children. And if you think about people's children, that's their heart. That's the heartbeat of who and what they are, and we have to come in and we have to take care of them. So at Crosswinds, we believe that when a child enters our church, that we are going to pledge that with God's help, we're going to see that the child is surrounded. The child is surrounded by love. The child is established in the faith, and that we confirm and strengthen the child in the way that they should go. That we help them to be who God created them to be, and we love them the way God has called us to create them. Crosswinds has a desire to protect our children. Our Crosswinds has a desire to protect our church, and Crosswinds has a desire to protect you. You know, the truth is, if you're in a room with someone and no one else is there and there's no protection in place, that anybody could say anything they want to say against you. And at Crosswinds, we want to protect you from that. The truth is, as we go through our lives, child abuse can occur anywhere. I want you to know that child abuse is criminal behavior, and every state has its own laws in place. But I think it's important for us to realize that the victim is never responsible. It is never the victim's fault, and they bear zero blame for the abuse. Sad to report to you that when it comes to child abuse, there are 3 million children who are abused in the U.S. each and every year. 1 out of 3 girls and 1 out of 6 boys will be sexually abused by the age of 18. What those numbers mean, if there are 8,219 children abused every day, 343 abused every hour, nearly 6 children are abused every minute, and 1 child is abused every 10 to 12 seconds of every hour of every day, including Sundays. The church is at risk and must protect itself. We know from the scandal in the Catholic Church and from the things that have happened in Protestant churches as well, different churches, that child abuse can be a real threat in a congregation as well. And because of that, we want to protect our children. We want to protect our church. We want to protect you. Crosswinds will follow these safe sanctuary guidelines that I'm sharing with you as we go through this e-training. We're going to protect the church, but even more importantly, we're going to protect every child who walks through the doors of our church. Here's the truth. There is no way that we can guarantee at Crosswinds that child abuse will never occur. No church you go to can make that claim. So it's important that we take steps. We must take steps to reduce and eliminate situations that could lead to a child's harm or injury. It's important for you to understand the different types of abuse. I'm going to leave these up here as we go through these and allow you a second to read them. But there are all kinds of types of abuse. The first type of abuse is physical abuse. Many of you know what physical abuse is. It involves the actually hitting a child, doing something violent with them, and just something that can hurt a child physically. Another type of abuse is emotional abuse. Emotional abuse can be one of the most painful. It's extremely devastating. It's hard to prove. This is when a child is told they're less than in some way, shape, or form. Another type of abuse is neglect. Now, neglect is one that you will notice. This will be the child who'll come into Sunday school in the middle of winter and they'll have on a t-shirt. And this is a child who comes in and seems to, hoard a whole bunch of snacks. At Crosswinds, we serve snacks. We've had instances where kids come in and they were hoarding the snacks. And a lot of times we're like, what's wrong with that child? Hungry people hoard. And children who are hungry hoard. So a lot of times we might have a child who comes in who's neglected. Another thing is sexual abuse. And we know how devastating sexual abuse can be. Examples of this include physical, verbal contact. A child is never really capable of consenting. And examples are here on your screen as you go through this e-training. Ritual abuse is something you may never have heard of. Ritual abuse is the worst cases of child abuse that are documented. And it could be physical, sexual, or psychological, and it's just done regularly, intentionally. Sometimes there's a ritual. Sometimes every time it's supper time, the child is locked in a closet, whatever it may be. It's very, very cruel. When we hear these things on the news, they're horrifying, and they seem too grim to be true. An example of one of the worst ritual abuse cases is a case in California. There was a book written on it, actually a series of 3 books. A Child Called It is one of those that talks about ritual abuse. As a worker in our children's ministry, it's important that you understand the indicators of abuse. These are things that you might look for when you see a child, or if something just in your spirit doesn't settle in right and you think there might be something going on. Indicators of physical abuse include those on this list. Emotional abuse, the one that's so hard to prove and it's so devastating to children. There are indicators for that as well. Here are some examples of emotional abuse indicators. Neglect. Neglect occurs when a child is not taken care of properly and they don't have the right, food, they don't have the right clothing. There's all kinds of symptoms that may indicate that as well, and those are shown on your screen as well. And then sexual abuse. There are indicators of this as well. A lot of times in sexual abuse, you'll see children who have advanced knowledge of sexual things at their age. And these are some of the signs that indicate that sexual abuse could be present in a child's life. And ritual abuse. These are some of the indicators for ritual abuse and some things that could happen in the life of a child. I know when we see this, a lot of us, this is depressing. This isn't the most entertaining video in the entire world or the most, incredible topic, but it's very, very important that we talk about this. It's important that you have an awareness of the types of abuse. It's important that you have an awareness of the symptoms of abuse. When it comes to abusers, we often think that abusers are, like in the movies, it's some, creepy guy, but the truth is that abusers, they look like you and they look like me. An abuser is someone who has greater power in a relation to a child and they use that power to harm the child. So it's a power differential. The abuser has more power than the child, and they use that to harm the child. It's also met when there's opportunity. And at Crosswinds, we want to eliminate the opportunity to exist for anyone to harm a child in the walls of our church or youth. Less than 20% of abuse is done by strangers. We always worry about that strangers that's going to hurt our children. But the truth is, in over 80% of child abuse incidents, the child knows their abuser. If you think about it, children from all socioeconomic, racial, ethnic, and social groups are abused. And abusers is the same way. These are people from all racial backgrounds, ethnic, all socioeconomics, and social groups. And the abusers, they can be leaders, they can be sociable, they can look like the best guy, the best woman. They can seem to care about kids, they're married, they have children. Statistics show that approximately 20% of abusers begin abusing others before they're the age of 18. So who are the abusers that could abuse children at church? Well, the potential includes preschool teachers, Sunday school teachers, nursery teachers, vacation Bible school teachers, coaches, camp counselors, youth workers, pastors, or anybody else. Abuse occurs when a child's vulnerability and an abuser's misuse of power have an opportunity to exploit the child without being discovered. Now, when abuse occurs in a church, the church is usually blown away. And the church's response might be things like, not in our church, no one would ever accuse us of this. But that as a church, we should have a response. And that response should be that the child is the top priority. The child must be cared for as well as the child's family. But in the congregation, the members are going to be stunned, they're going to be humiliated, they're going to be embarrassed, and they're going to be angry. And the suffering is going to continue because in today's world, it's going to be all over the media, and they'll even face civil court litigation. And church has a liability. The settlements can range from thousands of dollars to millions of dollars. If you think about it, no church can afford morally, ethically, or financially to fail to implement strategies for the reduction and the prevention of child abuse. And that's why Crosswinds follows our Safe Sanctuary policy. There are some basics that you should understand about Crosswinds policy. Scripture tells us that it is required that those who've been given trust must prove themselves faithful. At Crosswinds, we do everything we can to ensure the safety of our children. You'll notice on the form side of your document as you go through, there'll be a couple documents for you to look at. One of them will be your understanding, your signing of an agreement that you will comply with Crosswinds child abuse prevention policy. Another one will be for a national background check. At Crosswinds, we run a national background check on every person who serves in our children's ministries. This background check is very, very important to us, and this ensures the safety of our children. Many churches run a county-wide or a statewide check. We insist on doing the national-wide background check to make sure that our children are kept safe. At Crosswinds, when it comes to how we deal with our children, there are a couple things that are prohibited. And main things, first of all, you can never threaten or inflict physical injury on a child. You can jokingly say, I'm going to smack you. We don't do that. We don't say that to children. We can never verbally abuse a child either. We can never go to a child and go, you're so stupid. Every week you never get this right. We don't talk to children that way. At Crosswinds, we affirm children and we love children. Committing any sexual offense against a child or a youth, or making any kind of sexual advance, requesting a sexual favor, or engaging in any verbal, visual, or physical conduct of a sexual nature will not be tolerated. That would include showing them pictures on a phone, perhaps exposing them to something on a website. That's prohibited. We require every person who serves in children's ministry or youth ministry that they must watch this child abuse prevention training. They must fill out the forms that you will find. You'll see it on the link there. It'll be Crosswinds e-training, child abuse prevention forms. There'll be some forms that you'll have to fill out that show that you have completed this. You'll submit those forms to your children's director or your youth director. You'll submit those and they will get those filed through the office, and we will send off for those national background checks as well. Everyone who works with children or youth is required to watch this video each and every year. We need the reminders of why we need to protect our children. You need to know that when the national background check is completed and filed and come into you, that all the records are kept in the church office and all those records are confidential. We understand that some people may have had something in their past that come up. Perhaps they were in college and they got a little crazy one night and there's a disorderly conduct charge or traffic tickets and all that stuff, and that will have no bearing on your ability to be able to serve in children's ministry. What we're looking for are people who could be a threat to our children's safety. Now, the truth is that most people who have something in their background, if you were going to run a national background check, most of those people, they're not going to bother to do the background check. And that in itself is a safeguard in place to protect the children at Crosswinds Church. At our church, we have a 6-month rule. Sometimes this rule is not in place for people who already serve in a profession where they are nationally background checked, such as teachers, social workers, police officers, those things. We have a background check on them and we're able to bring them in a little sooner. But we have a 6-month rule for most of our volunteers. Under no circumstances is any adult allowed to be alone with a child behind a closed or locked door. You'll notice in all our rooms at both our campuses, we have glass in the door, so you are free to close the door during your class so that you don't hear other children or other youth talking while you're doing what you're doing. But the door is there as a safeguard. It protects our children and it protects you. You'll even notice that our pastor's offices have those doors there to ensure that people are protected and safe at Crosswinds. If you serve with somebody, we always have a 2-adult rule. That means in every room with children, there are supposed to be 2 adults. No one is supposed to be alone with a child or alone with a youth. The 2-adult rule also stipulates that you can't be related. Now, I know for a lot of people that's inconvenient. You would love to serve with your husband, but unfortunately, the reason that rule is in place is that there could be an abusive man or an abusive woman who has their spouse in a position to where they're afraid to say anything about what the person in power does, and they could help cover for something that's happening, so we ask that they not be non-related. If we have babysitters for our children, perhaps as you've been to our church, you've noticed we have babysitters. We try to have two babysitters on case, 2 babysitters to babysit our children. They must be 5 years older than the children being cared for. We have many of our youth who serve in our children's ministry, and they have to meet that age requirement before they're allowed to serve with our children, and they will always serve with an adult as well. The door, the top door, the glass should be left open whenever possible to ensure our children's safety. No child should ever be left unattended. That's a huge no-no. We are responsible for the safety of children when they are in our care. Teaching or to comfort or affirm a child in an age-appropriate manner is permitted. If a child needs a hug, give them a hug. Shouldn't make us afraid. We should just know that we do these things to protect our children. Children in 1st grade or older, the Safe Sanctuary says they shouldn't sit in the lap of nursery workers, but if a 2nd grader falls and skins their knees and they climb up and they want a hug, we go ahead and hug them, and then we get them on their way and make sure that they're safe. And we, as I said, we touch and affirm them in an age-appropriate manner. Ministry workers are not allowed to touch a child in the genital area unless it's in the changing of the diaper. For most of you as real kids workers, or if you're a youth worker, that's never going to be a situation that you deal with. And our nursery workers take care of that situation, but we are not allowed to do that. You need to understand that the pastors of Crosswinds Church are mandatory reporters in the state of Alabama. And what that means is that pastors are required to report child abuse, whether it was committed at Crosswinds, whether it was at an event that we had, such as an egg hunt or something we do for fall, whether it was off-site and we just hear about it, whether it's a child who comes into our preschool and something has happened, we are mandatory reporters. At Crosswinds, if you as a teacher observe some of those behaviors that we talked about, either in a real kids ministry or you work youth and you see some of these behaviors and it sets off something in your spirit and you're just not comfortable, we ask you to come to your ministry lead or come to the pastors and share that with us. We need you to document that, and by documenting that, we ask that you would send us an email and say, I am concerned about this child. Would you please check on the safety and well-being of this child? At Crosswinds, we will fill out a suspicion of child abuse response form. We will do some investigation, and we will let you know what we've done to make sure that that child is safe. Now, as I said earlier, that when it comes to knowing who abusers are, and we know from news reports of things that have happened in various churches, sometimes pastors can be abusers of children as well. If you submit a report into the pastors of Crosswinds Church and you feel it's not taken seriously and you feel that the child could be in danger and the pastors could be covering something up, we ask that you go around the pastors and you go straight to Madison County DHR. The number is on your screen here. Please call them. It's called permissive reporting, and you go ahead and report what your fears are for that child, what your fears are for that youth. If you feel a child is in imminent danger, please call law enforcement and call them quickly. On the document side of your e-training, there are 2 forms that are going to be required for you to complete this course, for you to be ready to be background checked, and for us to know that you are willing to partner with us in keeping our children and youth safe at Crosswinds. 2 forms will be required for you. The first is your participation covenant. Your participation covenant goes over all the things we've gone over to training, say you agree to comply with those. And you will check those off and you will sign that and you will turn that to your ministry lead. Additionally, there'll be a form that is your background check. You fill that out and that authorizes us to use the company that we use that will go in and do a background check and get a report back to us. I want to thank you. Thank you for your willingness to serve the children and the youth at Crosswinds Church. Thank you for understanding why we take this seriously, why we believe it is a sacred responsibility to care for the children at Crosswinds, why we believe that every person who comes in the door deserves to be loved and valued and respected for who they are, while we will do everything in our power to protect the kids and youth at Crosswinds Church. Our desire is to truly make Crosswinds Church a safe sanctuary for children. I thank you for participating in Crosswinds LeaderLink e-training for our child abuse prevention policy. Have a great time in children's ministry and our Real Kids ministry, playing with the kids. Have a great time in working with our youth. And know this, you are appreciated, you are loved, and you are prayed for as you faithfully serve Jesus Christ.